How do you measure the greatness of a man? And right before I introduce Dr. Cynthia Mother Pratt, I want to just give some brief reflections. How do you measure the greatness of a man? The English playwright, Sir William Shakespeare, in his play, The Twelfth Night, stated, and I quote, "Some men are born great. Some men achieve greatness, and some men have greatness thrust upon them." And then the distinguished British Prime Minister, Sir Winston Churchill, stated, and I quote, as he was giving a speech right after the Second World War, when Britain had seen much turmoil, much pain, and much suffering. He was giving tribute to the greatness of the men and the women who went to battle on behalf of the United Front. And he said that never ever in the history of mankind, in measuring the greatness of these individuals, has so few done so much for so many. And yet, and still it was the Jamaican writer, Robert Nesta Marley, in characterizing the greatness of a man, he says that the greatness of a man is not measured by the wealth he acquires, but it is in his integrity and in his ability to positively impact those around him. With those three quotes, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to highlight the greatness of a man some of you call Brother Ozzy, some of you call Ozzy, some of you call Brother Pinder, others of you call Reverend Pinder. I grew up calling him Daddy, and now, because of the grandkids, I call him Papa. As long as I could remember, he was always there. And that is so significant, because now I hold the position of Deputy Registrar General of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and let me tell you, every single day I meet young women who come into the Registrar General's office to register children without fathers. And I always take the opportunity to ask them, where is the father of this child? And they would respond, he ain't checking. He ain't there. He don't want to sign. And some would say, I'm tired of waiting on him. He just ain't ready to sign it. But ladies and gentlemen, I never had that experience of wondering where my father was. He was either at work, he was either at church, or he was home. Amen. And while he had friends, he always used to tell us, you all ain't never see me keep company. So when you're done with what you're doing, get home. At 6 o'clock in the morning, every morning, prayer meeting. And as David and Ryan could remember, we could never get out of bed in time. And so he would come and pull the sheet from off of us. Come. Time for prayers. Time for prayers. Time for prayers. I will share with you just briefly 3 memorable moments. And you know my dad at times stutters. I'm going to tell you one time when he really couldn't talk because he was shocked at what he found. But before I go into that, you know, there was on one occasion when he pretended to be the chef of some nicely made crab cakes that my mom made. My mom made the crab cakes. I watched her pick the crabs. She cut up the herbs, she seasoned it, and she slapped them between her hands to get them just right. And boy, were they scrumptious. But my dad took a few of them at work. And in taking them to work, he bragged to his good friend Sidney Jones that he made these crab cakes. And he said, boy, Sid, you need to taste this crab cake. So you can't beat that. And boy, the office was lit right up. They ate these crab cakes, and Dad bragged all day. They were just giving him props. Boy, yours, you really outdid yourself this time. And boy, was my dad proud. He was walking around like a peacock. I'll never forget it. But 2 weeks later, Brother Sid happens to have called the house. And he called the house because he was trying to make his own crab cakes. And I answered the phone. He said, Ron, where you, Dad? I said, he right here. And Dad came on the phone, and you know, they joked and they laughed like how they usually do. And all I heard him say, boy, yours, wait, what you put in these crab cakes? But my dad forgot. And he had taken credit for the crab cake. And in forgetting, he called the true maker of the crab cake. So he said, hold on, Nellie? Said, Ron, know what you put in the crab cake? And boy, my dad could not live that down. When he went to work the following day, the guys and Brother Sid kept teasing him. So boy, they say, oh Lord, Nellie made the crab cake and they come here bragging. And any time my dad claimed to have made something, they would always pick up the phone and call Mom and ask him, did he make it? And then secondly, there was a time when my brother Ryan, he used to come in late. And he would come knock on our room door. And when I checked the time, because he had a curfew, his curfew was 12 o'clock. And Ryan always was stretching the curfew. He was around 18, 19 then. And he would always stretch the curfew. One night he would come in shortly after 12, then 12:30. Well, this particular night, he came in around 1 and he knocked on the door, and he would always come by the window and knock. And I would be dead and sleep. Ron. I said, boy, what happened to you? Open the door, boy. I said, man, look. Boy, I said, Daddy, you have your hair. He said, man, Daddy, just open the door. I said, okay. So I'm trying to get him out of trouble. I went out the room tiptoeing. I passed Dad in the hallway and didn't know. He's standing in the bathroom door, and I passed him in the hallway because I turned on no lights. And Dad knew the house like the back of his hand. And I'm tipping toe when I went into the kitchen, and the screen door had a crack. When you pulled the screen door, it had a spring on it. And I opened it, and then I unlocked the door, opened it, and I still didn't see Dad standing behind me. When I opened the door, Ryan came in. Ryan took 2 steps. He thought he was in safe. Not so. Dad stood up. Where you just come from? Where you just come from? And Ryan had his cup in his hand with some wonderful beverage. And Dad smelled the cup. He said, no, Ryan, no. And all I kept seeing is mouth moving, but no words coming out, and he kept moving. And that was the most angriest I've ever seen my dad, and I just broke down. I went straight in the room. And I left him and Ryan out there in their counseling session. Then lastly, I want to tell you of this time when there was this snake in the wash house. And this was this huge foul snake. It ain't gonna be long. A huge foul snake. Well, look here. I was terrified, and I shouted, "Daddy!" It was on a Sunday. Mom came running, Tally came running, and none of them would go near the door. Little did I know then, and Dad admitted it later, that he was equally as terrified when he saw the size of it. But then he said, "Get the cutlass." And I think Ryan ran for the cutlass. He came and he began to chop it. And as he chopped the steak, I then saw, because I was terrified at the size of this thing. This thing was huge. And by the time the thing dropped, it appeared to have been dropping in my direction. But look here. I just picked up speed because I was standing behind him. And I just picked up speed and I ran. And he admitted to his friends later that when he saw the size of it, he was equally as afraid, but because we were there, he walked out prison bold with this thing. He said, "Man, this is what y'all afraid of?" But I didn't know he was afraid until he relayed the story to one of his friends. But ladies and gentlemen, those are the memorable moments I have of my father. And while there are many persons today who are trying to twist God's intentions of the family, there are even many people who are questioning God's order in the home and God's order in society. And there are many people who are even questioning their own sexuality. I have never, ever, ever had any doubts about where my father was. I have never, ever had any question as to my father's love for his children and his family. And I have never, ever had any doubt about who God was, if God exists, and if the God we serve is real. Because I was taught that from as far as I could remember. And I bless God for my father, Reverend Oswald Pinder. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm also here to introduce the guest speaker, a woman of all seasons, a woman who has walked with kings, but not lose the common touch. A woman who fears her God, who loves her God, and who is not afraid to declare of her God. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the former Member of Parliament for the St. Cecilia constituency, the former Deputy Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, a former teacher, a former nurse, a former lecturer, and if you don't remember, the former Acting Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I give you a woman who is a disciplinarian, who is a God-fearing woman, who is a no-nonsense woman. I give you a woman who says what she means, and she means what she says. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly put your hands together and welcome to the podium the Honorable Dr. Cynthia Mother Pratt.